Ant Anstead, thank you so much for joining me in talkSPORT Driving. You're here to tell us a little bit about Born Mechanic. Series 2 is out soon. Tell us a little bit more about it and what we can expect from this series.
Right, well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a real privilege to be here. Season 1 last year actually came about because of something that happened in real life, but for TV. Growing up, me and my brothers never lived in our own home. My dad worked in boarding schools. He was a catering manager, so as my friends would tell me, he was the dinner lady. So my entire childhood was living in school accommodation. So a couple of years ago, my parents declared that they were going to retire, which I don't believe them, by the way. I don't think they'll ever retire. But, I had an opportunity to give back, to say thank you. So I secretly started looking for a house. I want to buy them a home. And I looked around some sensible houses, a couple of new builds houses that you could move into tomorrow. And then I walked into this falling down, virtually derelict 500-year-old post-medieval farmhouse. And I'm like, this is it. This makes sense because, we're crazy. But houses speak to you. So anyway, this place spoke to me, and I ignored all the professional advice from the surveyors saying run a mile, bought the house. And then I quickly realised I'd bitten off more than I can chew. This is a monumental build. But on the farm was this beautiful barn, although it leaked. But the barn could be turned into a workshop. So I figured, well, look, I'm struggling a bit on the home, but what I can do is fix cars. So what if I turn this into a workshop, get some cars, fix them, flip them, and get some money that I can put into the farmhouse? And then, miraculously, this kind of ridiculous business model was formed, and Discovery got wind of it. And then, season 1 became the highest rated show on the network. And very quickly we moved to season 2, and we're doing it all over again.
And what cars can we expect to see sort of renovating and building on during this series?
Well, there's a really cool mix, actually. Our oldest car's a 1929 Austin 7 Chummy, and our newest car's an early 90s BMW E30, and then we've got some cool stuff in between. We're doing a Mark 1 Transit van, 60th birthday of Transit this year, a Morris Minor Traveller, TVR Tamar, which you don't see many of, beach buggy, little old Fiat 500, a Mark 1 Capri.
Wow, okay.
Cool cars. So basically cool cars. We only do cool cars.
And is there a particular favourite from this series that you've enjoyed the most?
Do you know, I had a real love for the Austin 7. I restored pre-TV loads of Austin 7s. I used to cut my teeth building specials. So, getting bits of cars. And I'd commonly start with an Austin 7 platform. And I built some really cool sort of single-seater Austin 7 race cars. Those boat tail race cars, sort of 1930s race car, boat tail, you jump out because there's no seatbelt. I actually built the Austin 7 for the Wall of Death, which is you normally see motorbikes going around, but there is a little red Austin 7 called Tallulah. But I made that car, and it somehow still runs. So I've been asking to do an Austin 7 on TV for 10 years. So finally, we get to do one.
And if Discovery and Quest come back and say, Ant, we'd love to do Series 3, what would be your dream car that you'd love to do for Series 3?
Gosh, that's such a wild question. I think because I live full-time in California, I'd like to do another American car. I did an American car last season, a T-Bird. But it would be nice to have a nod to America. I'd love to do a special. I'd love to get a sort of a 1930s rolling chassis which hasn't got a body, and just English wheel craft my own boat tail, aluminium body from scratch. That would be cool. I'd like to do an Elan.
Lotus Classic.
Yeah, I'd like to do a race car.
Yeah.
I've been at Silverstone all weekend, so it would be nice to have a car that's competitive. There you go. We've just come up with 4. Hopefully Discovery are watching this.
And your passion for cars has been something that has been present throughout your career. You've driven and fixed some amazing vehicles over your time. Is there a particular favourite car that you've either driven or worked on?
Well, my standout favourite cars are a Series 1 Land Rover. I have a real soft spot for them. They represent everything a classic car should. It's weird as well because they're the universally recognised car. I could draw just the silhouette in pencil on a blank piece of paper, and anybody in the world would go as Land Rover. Also, it's classless. Like the King of England or a plumber could look cool driving a Land Rover. And I have a Series 1. I have a Series 1 in California, early, like a late 49 probably. And it's the ultimate car. And I like a car that doesn't try too hard. Like, it knows it's cool. So there's no real effort. And everything it represents and stands for. So I did a series 3 last year. And I don't think they'd let me get away with doing another Land Rover. But I would if they could.
And if money was no object and you could go out and buy any car in the world for yourself, what are you going for?
Gosh, that's such a wild question because it kind of...
That's what we're here for.
Well, it probably sits into certain genres, that kind of 50s, 60s GT.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, like short wheelbase Ferrari 250, DB4 GT Zagato, that kind of that period. But I'm actually drawn more to sort of 20s and 30s. So, you know, a boat-tailed Alpha 158 or a blower, Bentley blower. Gosh, I could just have to choose one.
And I'm sure there's not too many cars that you don't like, but if you could wipe one from the earth and pretend it never was built, what one would you get rid of?
Triumph TR7. Come on, you surely agree.
Why is that? Go on.
Well, think about the lineage of TRs leading up. Like the TR6 is epic, the 5 is epic, the 4 is epic, the 3A is beautiful. And then some guy, I'm pretty sure, it was Friday at 3 o'clock, and they found some young kid at Triumph and was like, get an Etch-a-Sketch, design a car, but you got to be done by 5, and we're going to make it. It's awful. What a terrible car.
I don't know, you're big into your F1 and your motorsport. So where did that passion for F1 come from? Was there any particular drivers you sort of grew up and loved watching?
Well, I think like all British car boys, you're obsessed with, you know, iconic British brands. You know, and I was always a Lotus fan, and Chapman's impact on Formula One was massive, and a Williams fan. So I think, you know, being a car guy, it would be impossible to be a car guy in the 90s and 20s without being influenced by racing. You know, it was at a time when F1 was loud and brash and it had great personalities, and, you know, it's having a renaissance at the moment, which is really lovely, particularly in the US where I live. It's almost like Americans have just got the memo. I'm like, oh, guys, what have you been doing for 75 years? This is the coolest motorsport on the planet. So, yeah, I think all racing impacted me because I always loved it, but I never gravitated towards the driving side. I've always been a builder. Like, given the choice to fix a car or drive a car, I'd always choose fix it. So whenever I look at, you know, racing today, I'm always more fascinated about the engineering that goes into it. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, F1's doing really well at the moment.
And what you were saying there about F1 starting to get big in America, do you think that's going to get even bigger with Cadillac coming in next year, announcing their driver lineup this week, Perez and Bottas to be their driving lineup?
Yeah, I mean, it can only improve the sport from an American perspective. And America's the only country that has 3 races. So already it's kind of the nation's doubled down and said, look, we're accepting this sport, we love this sport, and it's dominating. I heard it's the highest growing sport in the US at the moment. And, you know, you only need to wander around and you meet F1 fans on every street corner. But what's really interesting about the culture in America is, I would say historically Americans are generationally sports avid. So if your fan is an LA Galaxy, if your dad, sorry, is an LA Galaxy fan, the son is and the grandson is, and they share the t-shirts. I'm a Dodgers fan for life. But Americans don't seem to have actually aligned with a team yet. And they certainly aren't picking Max. And they had every opportunity to pick Max over the last couple of years. Like, there's a lot of Manchester United fans in America that have never been to Old Trafford, but they bought into those glory years. And you'd have thought that would translate to them going, oh, F1's here, Red Bull and Max, but they didn't. So it's really interesting. Adding a Cadillac now, I think, is either a brilliant commercial move by an American brand to capture an American audience. They come with us. You know, and Valtteri's a great personality. You know, he's good for that American market. I think they'll struggle, you know, because ultimately it's a sport. People really mostly care about the winners. Gosh, did I say that on live? Yeah, but there we are. But I think somehow they're going to capture, you know, an American audience.
And we've seen you at a couple of the races this year. What have you made of the season so far? Both McLaren drivers battling it out for the title this year, Piastri and Lando. Who do you reckon's who's your pick out of those two to win it?
Yeah, it's weird. I had the privilege of going to the British Grand Prix. I did some of the hosting for F1 television, and you know, it was really fitting for me, more interested in the classic side of cars, to be at the home of British motorsport on the 75th anniversary. And it's wild, you know, 1950 at Silverstone was the first ever race. And what's really weird about that 75 years ago is that there was a single dominant manufacturer back in 1950. Alfa Romeo. In fact, in that first race, they came first, second, third, would have come fourth if Fangio hadn't had an oil leak. Dominant. Arguably, the Alfa 158 is the most successful F1 car of all time. So you've got this period in 1950 where Alfa Romeo, everything is red. And right now, the cycle has repeated itself, and we've got this period where there is a dominant manufacturer. But thank goodness we have a dominant manufacturer with the ability for one of the two team drivers to win. And I think most people statistically will say it's Piastri, right? He's the one that appears to be in the most dominant place, but Farina, who won that first race at Silverstone, went on to be world champion, and Lando won this time. So if history truly repeats itself and the universe is aligned, it says it's Lando.
Wow. Okay.
I know, right?
We've said it here now. There's something for us to come back to at the end of the season right here. One English driver who's not quite had the season he would have hoped for is Lewis Hamilton. How disappointing has it been for you to see him look so despondent in a Ferrari this year?
It's not disappointing at all. I mean, if anybody's like tough as old boots, it's Lewis. The embodiment of setback is what separates the world class from the not quite theirs. And it's really interesting when I listen to successful people, particularly sports people, talk about success. The word failure is a big impetus to that. And I've heard some really great TED Talks from world-class athletes that brush over the highlights and they go straight to the setbacks. And the Lewis I know almost needed a year of hard. He needed a year of setback, and it's a change of car at the end of this year. So it feels like when history tells the story in 10 years, 100 years' time, it feels like Lewis has got this team change bed-in year where actually the pressure should and would be lifted off him to just kind of find his feet, because let's be honest, he has nothing to prove to anyone. He doesn't owe anyone anything. But what he does deserve is a year of getting to know who the mechanic is and getting to chat to, the guy in the catering department and the guy that picks up the bag, because that's what makes special teams, is when you've got all these people rowing in the same direction, and that takes a minute. You don't deserve to be world champion because you change cars. You earn it, and Lewis is somebody who's earned it, and I think this is the year that this year was the earn it year. And, the romantic side of me is like, gosh, I'd really love to see him be world champion in red.
Well, trying to translate to a different sport, we'll see Marc Marquez have a renaissance in MotoGP this year with an Italian brand, Ducati. Do you hope that Lewis might have one of those second half of this year, maybe going into next year with Ferrari?
I mean, the romantic side is, yes, we're British and, he's our champion and we want Lewis to do well. But I'm also happy that he writes the year off. I'm also happy that he just says, right, let's consolidate. Let's build a team around me. And also, he's not taking this car forward to next season. It's a brand new car. If I was Lewis, I'd be like, do what you can to build, but I'd be secretly driving next year's car.
And we've talked about some amazing drivers from this year and previous years. Have you got a particular sort of pantomime villain from the world of F1 over the years, like a driver who has had a bit of a nasty streak, but you've had a little bit of a soft spot for?
Short answer, no. No, I mean, there's a few standout drivers that I've admired. But I think the sport, especially now, we're in an age, that word rivalry, that exists in many, many sports. That rivalry is that age-old pantomime of the good and the bad, or the blue v red. I think the sport thrives on it. And it's interesting. We talked about an American market. The American market really engages with that. So to that end, right now, we probably don't have that as much as we hoped we could have. And there's loads of things the sport could do to make it more like that. And if you're one of the critiques of the sport, because ultimately we want more overtaking, we want more instants, we want more, we want those iconic rivalries from the Hunt Lauda period. That's what we're all praying for. But this is the most ultra professional sport in the world. It's very difficult. There's going to be and one day there's going to be a kind of a brand out there that's going to meet a driver that can drive and is also controversial, and then that's probably going to be the sweet spot because controversy sells.
And lastly, I've really enjoyed this chat. Do you have a hot take or rogue prediction for the second half of 2025 in F1? That people would think, oh, not quite, didn't think that would happen.
Gosh, I mean, from a constructor's perspective, it's wrapped up. You know, unless something bizarre happens, which I don't think it will. I mean, unless there's a few, you know, I like Liam Lawson. I like him. I like him as a guy, and I didn't like the way he was treated. And fair play to him to just suck it up and get on with it. And every time Liam does well, I always think, good on you. Like, because the worst is somebody talking. Just shut your mouth. You know, be silent. And actions are louder than words. And you know, so I'm kind of willing, you know, him on to do well. And of course, we had the podium anomaly at Silverstone, which everybody loved. The whole paddock loved it. And in fact, that afternoon on social media, I saw, because they didn't have champagne in the garage, I saw all the other teams bringing champagne. Like, oh my God, this dude, he didn't even have champagne ready. So that's a wild thing, but it's what the sport needs. So short answer, constructors wrapped up. And there's going to be some glimmers where weird things happen. And we want rookies to do well because the sport needs rookies.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. Before we finish, where can we find Ball Mechanics Series 2?
Well, the second season starts on September 16th. It's available on Quest, and you can stream it on Discovery+.
Brilliant. Ant Anstead, thank you so much for your time. It's been great speaking to you, and looking forward to watching the series.
Top man. Look at that.
Thank you.